you being here. Thank you to all the folks that have worked hard, and we really appreciate it. God bless. And we're going to help our, I've got a lot of kinfolk, so Babin's a Cajun name, and I got lots of kinfolks over there across the Sabine River, and they've come over here and helped us numbers and numbers of times, and so this will be an opportunity for us to go over there and help them.
Brian, if you're Cajun, you serving lunch?
Well, my wife knows how to cook that stuff. I guarantee you we'll have that arranged.
Speaking of neighbors, we'll bring up your neighboring
Lake and Moss Bluff to be cognizant of what's going on and to shelter at home. And unfortunately, despite the heat that they're experiencing, shelter at home under those circumstances means they need to be on the inside of their home with the doors and windows closed and the air conditioning off if they're lucky enough to have electricity, whether it's by generator or otherwise. And please understand we're doing everything we can to get that situation under control, put out that fire, and to stop any off-premises migration. And again, we have the state police and the fire marshal's office here to answer specific questions about that. You may have seen some footage that shows the chemical fire in Westlake that I just mentioned from the perspective of the lake and looking underneath the bridge. And if you've seen that, you've seen the Isle of Capri casino that's on the barge that obviously came loose during the storm and is sort of wedged underneath the bridge. The bridge remains closed, so that means I-10 is closed, and that's until we can do an inspection to see what sort of damage, if any, was caused by that barge. Obviously, there may be additional directions from local officials in that area. We're encouraging everyone. Well, first of all, this goes for everybody across the state to follow the directions that you're given by your local officials and your offices of emergency preparedness, but particularly in the Westlake, Moss Bluff, Lake Charles areas, pay attention to their directions as it relates to the chemical fire. Hurricane Laura, which struck our state, was recently downgraded, I think about 30 minutes or so ago, to a tropical storm. The center at that time was between Shreveport and Ruston. The track of the storm was just slightly east of what had been forecasted, and according to a conversation that I had with Ken Graham of the Hurricane Center, that is why we didn't get as much storm surge pushed up into Lake Charles, because the eye of the storm never crossed over the Calcasieu Ship Channel. And so that very strong north wind, I should say south wind, was never pushing that water up the Calcasieu Ship Channel. It had been forecasted to track further to the west, and which would have pushed much more water up. Well, whatever the reason is, we are very thankful, because there is widespread and very significant damage because of the winds and some because of the rain. We're thankful we didn't get more storm surge than we did. Just about the entire state saw tropical storm force winds. Everything except for extreme southeast Louisiana and the North Shore. That's how big and powerful this storm was. After I finish the press conference, I will leave with many of the officials that you see with you to join some local officials in Lake Charles, and then do an overflight over at least Calcasieu, Cameron, and we believe Vermilion parishes, so that we can put eyes on the damage. Please understand that right now we continue to be in an immediate response mode, which is about life-saving. So search and rescue is ongoing right now, not just in extreme southwest Louisiana, but basically as that storm moved north, we were putting people and assets in behind that storm as soon as it was safe to do so, to do search and rescue. We had 1,500 individuals in the state standing by to do search and rescue, about 400 pieces of equipment, high water vehicles, boats, aircraft, you name it. All of that has been coordinated. That search and rescue is ongoing right now. So today is about saving lives, moving people out of their homes if their homes are no longer safe and habitable, making sure that we get them taken care of. And what that means in this COVID environment is getting them into a non-congregate shelter just as soon as possible, a hotel room or a motel room. And that's what we're going to be working on until such time as that is done, and then we will get down to the damage assessments and so forth. So suffice it to say, for now, there's an awful lot of work being done by a lot of good, dedicated public servants. We have our federal partners on the ground. We have people from other states who are here assisting in search and rescue. You know the array of state agencies that have been working at this, and obviously we're working with local first responders, sheriff's deputies, fire departments, you name it. I do want to point out that while we have about 600,000 service locations without electricity across the state of Louisiana, and if I just mentioned where we saw tropical storm force winds and where we didn't, and so the outages are obviously concentrated where we did. So Baton Rouge to New Orleans, the North Shore, not many outages, but just about the entire rest of the state is seeing significant outages. The good news is we had more line crews pre-positioned in Louisiana ahead of landfall than ever before. But that is not to say that restoration of power is going to be done very quickly, because we believe there was tremendous damage done to the power infrastructure. And so it may take a while, so we do ask people to be as patient as you can be and understanding as you can be, but understand we have more people who are addressing this situation more quickly than ever before. And while they're out on the road restoring electricity, while we're doing search and rescue and other response related to the fire and different things that we've seen, now is not the time to go sightseeing. I'm appealing to everybody in Louisiana, don't get out on the road unless it is absolutely necessary for you to do that. Please stay home and be safe. We still have an awful lot of places where trees are down across the road, where electrical lines are down across the road and so forth, and we need to be moving our response vehicles to where they are needed. So please stay off the road. And speaking of roads and some that you can't get on even if you wanted to, I'm going to ask Dr. Sean Wilson to come now and give an update on the roads and highways of Louisiana.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon, good morning. As most of you have probably seen on social media, the Isle of Capri barge was actually dislodged from its dock and connected itself to our bridge. And just got a text, Governor, that the barge has been removed, and we will commence the bridge inspection process via drone, and contingent upon the chlorine incident that's underway in the vicinity of the bridge, we will then complete the inspection, which requires our inspectors to actually put eyes on the bridge and ensure that it's there. As we've said before, an unsafe bridge in Louisiana is a closed bridge, and we can't stress enough the importance of staying off the interstate, particularly in the case of the Lake Charles Bridge. We also have live wires on I-210 as well as on I-49 in Alexandria, Louisiana. That's in addition to all of the debris as well as vegetative land material that has been blown into our right-of-way. All of the teams in our districts are engaged in this process to clear and remove the debris. We're actually bringing about 75 individuals from southeast Louisiana over to southwest Louisiana to assist that district that received not only personal family damage, but also to the facilities at the department. So we've got field teams all over the western portion of our state, from Shreveport all the way down to Lake Charles and Cameron. We've also activated our debris contracts. That's a private contract relationship we have that we're bringing in 25 teams to remove debris off of state highways. That's about 5 crews per parish for the immediate impacted area, but we do have debris contracts covering the entire state that will be in addition to what DOTD staff is able to provide. We're also seeing about 40 additional weather-related closures. And I mentioned to the governor yesterday, bridges are a blessing and a curse, and that we've got quite a few of them, and we've got quite a few that are SCAR-critical bridges that have to be inspected before we allow you to cross. And so I can't stress enough, as we said before, driving through standing water is never a good idea, but also driving through roads and bridges that have not been cleared by our staff yet can be very problematic, both for you and for the resources of state police and other law enforcement agencies. I remind all drivers to pay attention to 511la.org. That's where you're going to get the latest and greatest around opened highways and interstates, which you may see on social media. You may see cars passing. We do make provisions for Entergy and other energy companies to get back and try and restore electricity. So just because you see some movement doesn't mean that it's okay for you to drive. 511la.org is the best place to do and get that information. And then finally, we are, Governor, still prepared to use our buses, our coaches to provide runs for folks who need medical assistance where we've evacuated them to, but more importantly for the rescue and recovery of Southwest Louisiana and other places where we've had damage done to the state. So with that, Governor, I'll be happy to take questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. There are a couple of silver linings this morning that I think we can all be grateful for. The first is that the storm surge did not materialize to the degree that had been forecasted. Now, look, 9 to 12 feet of storm surge is still a lot of storm surge. And we had some gauges in Cameron Parish that actually failed after registering 12 feet. And so we think that there were some values higher than 12, probably none higher than 15 feet. But that's a lot of storm surge, but it's not the 20 feet that we were told. And then not only was that not the initial surge that came upon the coast, the storm never tracked west across the ship channel. All of those things helped tremendously. So the water damage was less than anticipated. Hopefully that means the homes that were damaged can be made habitable and safe and secure much more quickly and cheaply than would otherwise be the case, and people don't have to shelter at all in some cases or won't have to shelter for very long. Another piece of good news is that despite the strength of that storm and how long it lasted, we never lost communication with the affected parishes. That's the first time that has ever happened, and I think that's a result of the investments that we have made over the years, really since Hurricane Katrina, to make sure that we have state-of-the-art and redundant communication systems in place. And it also made it much, not just easier, but faster for us to discuss what was going on in the affected parishes and begin assessing their needs and directing the assistance just as soon as it was safe to do that. Now, look, we've talked about how blessed we've been, and we have been in the grand scheme of things, but we have learned of 4 deaths in Louisiana caused by this storm. All were related to trees falling on residences, which is in line with this being a major wind event, and none of them were in extreme southwest Louisiana. The 4 fatalities that I'm aware of happened in Vernon, Jackson, and Acadia parishes. Obviously, I'm asking that we all lift up these families in prayer, and certainly I'm concerned that as we continue to go out and do primary and secondary search and rescue, we're going to find more fatalities. I hope not. I pray not. But that is why we go out and do those search and rescues. I would remind people that even though that storm surge was a little less than we anticipated, the southerly flow still continues. And in fact, that outer band basically reaches down into Corpus Christi, Texas, and makes a large counterclockwise rotation, pushing additional water still. And we are getting reports now in Vermilion parishes and parishes east of there that water continues to rise. Now, not as quickly as we had feared, but what I'm trying to tell people is, in your particular area, you may not have seen the water at its highest yet as it relates to Laura, so be cognizant of that. But with more information on coastal water levels and what we're going to do to dewater where we can and need to, I'm going to ask Chip Klein of the CPRA to come up and address you. And on the back side of that, I'll come finish the prepared remarks, and then we'll all take your questions.
Well, thank you, Governor. As the Governor has alluded to in his opening comments, this storm did not bring the storm surge that was predicted. And it would appear that most of the damage across coastal Louisiana is going to be caused by wind. But I think it's very important for the public to understand that water levels across coastal Louisiana are still at very high levels. Particularly, as the Governor mentioned, in Vermilion Parish and in Southwest Iberia Parish, water levels continue to rise. Additionally, there's a very strong wind across South Louisiana, which, number one, does not allow for areas that experienced heavy rainfall and heavy storm surge to drain quickly. And additionally, a strong southern wind allows for additional water to continue to stack up across coastal regions of our state, pushing water further inland. One of the lessons that was learned from Hurricane Katrina and Rita was that just because a storm is past does not mean that we are out of harm's way. If you recall, after Hurricane Katrina, the major damage that was caused around the greater New Orleans area happened after the storm. So those of us at the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority are constantly monitoring water levels, and we'll be performing assessments of all of our flood control structures across coastal Louisiana. And we will also be assessing the impacts of our coastal shoreline from Careman Parish all the way to Plaquemines Parish. As the Governor also alluded to, while this storm focused on southwest Louisiana, some of the outer bands that are coming out of Corpus Christi, that are coming across the Gulf of Mexico right now, are headed straight for southeast Louisiana. So just because you did not see a storm surge or heavy rainfall in southeast Louisiana, you need to be paying very close attention to those outer bands and the impacts that it will continue to have on southeast Louisiana. So at CPRA, we continue to provide the coastal parishes emergency operation personnel with the best available data that we have on water level projections so that they can fully inform coastal residents of the continued risk that they face across our coast. Thank you.
And with those bands that Chip was just talking about, we are, much of Louisiana, I should say, is under a tornado warning for the next couple of hours. And this is something that's been playing out for about 24 hours. If you remember, here in the Capital Region yesterday, we had numerous warnings that went out for potential tornadoes. I have to believe that we had some that probably formed and touched down overnight, but it was dark, and how do you know tornado damage from hurricane damage? But it is something we need to be paying attention to today. I want you to know the National Guard has more than 5,400 guardsmen activated, and that continues to build as a result of my authorization for a full Guard activation. And we will use the National Guard in a variety of ways, and just as soon as we possibly can, we're going to re-engage them on COVID testing, community testing, surge site testing, and working with our food banks, as well as to continue to manage the warehouses that we have for PPE and other materials. The National Guard has approximately 222 high water vehicles and 65 boats that are manned and staged in southern Louisiana, prepared to provide search and rescue support. And again, not just in southern Louisiana, but they're being staged to fall in behind the storm as soon as it is safe to do so. And in fact, that's already occurred up the western side of Louisiana. They've got almost 1 million liters of water, 507,000 meals ready to eat, and those two are strategically placed throughout our state and ready to support our citizens. Wildlife and Fisheries has 170 agents and boats staged and ready for search and rescue operations, and they're engaged in that as we speak as well. I did want to report that last night Secretary Azar of Health and Human Services signed a public health emergency declaration for Louisiana and for Texas, but it provides greater flexibility relative to the Medicaid and Medicare programs with regulations that affect hospitals and nursing homes and other providers, and it just allows us the flexibility that we need to better serve people under emergency conditions. These are very similar to waivers that we received back in 2016, and we can request additional waivers if we decide that we need them. But this allows the providers to do what they need to do in order to meet the demands of emergency, but without worrying about whether they're going to be ineligible to receive the reimbursement associated with the care that they're providing, because they didn't provide it in the exact same way that they typically would. We do continue to encourage residents to call 211 with any storm-related questions and medical needs. 211 is prepared to respond and direct residents to the right place depending upon what their needs are. Speaking of the public health emergency today, we did report 723 new COVID cases, 23 additional deaths, again, quite sadly. I mean, think about that. We don't know the death total from the storm, but thus far it's 4. Today alone, 23 related to COVID. So that should underscore what we all know, but maybe lost sight of because of the hurricane, and we are still in a COVID environment. And we need people to play their role, make sure that they're wearing their masks, social distancing, washing their hands frequently, staying home when you're sick. And all of that becomes more complicated when you're trying to respond to a storm. The good news is that hospitalizations across the state related to COVID-19 continue to decline today, and we're very thankful for that. My biggest concern right now on COVID is that we don't have the robust testing taking place across the state right now that we need in order to know whether our positivity is inching up or whether we have more cases, and if so, are they in the congregate setting or in the community setting? Are they related to education or so forth? And so we really need to get back to our testing just as soon as we possibly can. Did want to give you an update on shelters. Right now we have more than 2,100 individuals in shelters across the state. The overwhelming majority, more than 1,900 of those, are in non-congregate shelters, hotel and motel rooms. The rest are in congregate shelters, all being run by parishes, some in coordination with the American Red Cross. For any of those individuals who need to remain in a shelter, or for additional people whose homes are not habitable, safe, and secure, we will be working to get them into hotel and motel rooms. We do have approximately 800 more under contract, primarily in the Baton Rouge and New Orleans area. And if we need more than that, we will find the space. Again, we're in a COVID environment, and we want people to be as safe as possible, not just from the storm, but also from the virus. So if you need shelter, please text LA Shelter to 898-211. LA Shelter to 898-211. We'll give you information about where to go. With respect to food, and I hesitate to do this because people are going to believe we have DSNAP available to us now, disaster SNAP benefits. We do not. We will have to meet the threshold and be approved for individual assistance before it will be available. But that may well happen. And what individuals can do now is they can pre-register for DSNAP so that in the event that it is turned on subsequently, they've already done what they need to do in order to qualify. And so it is not yet available. I want to repeat that. And it may take some time to turn it on. and we actually have to figure out who lost electricity and for how long, and to determine really who is eligible. But I want you to know that even if you pre-registered before in previous disasters, you need to register again, because the Department of Children and Family Services did upgrade their system. And so you need to include as much information as you can that you're asked for, including your mobile telephone number and your parish of residence. But go to dcfs.la.gov/dsnap. dcfs.la.gov/dsnap. Remember, SNAP recipients do not need to register for DSNAP. So if you're already on SNAP, you don't need to register. These are for individuals who might qualify who are not already on SNAP. SNAP recipients are already receiving the emergency allotments to bring them to the maximum benefit for their household size because of the COVID emergency. So those are automatically loaded. You're not going to receive a separate emergency allotment for this event because you're already at the maximum. DCF applied for another COVID emergency allotment to continue into the month of September, by the way. SNAP recipients can apply for replacement benefits if their households lose food purchase for SNAP benefits and lost power for at least 24 consecutive hours. So for more information on all of this, you can go to dcfs.la.gov/disaster-FAQ. And before I take questions, I did want to point out that this morning, the Louisiana Workforce Commission, while simultaneously working to respond to this natural disaster, was able to run the remaining 25% of those cases, those transactions, related to individuals eligible for additional unemployment federal enhanced benefits that are being funded through FEMA. That was about $47 million. And so the file has been run. That is complete. And we're already looking forward to resuming those payments next week. So those payments are basically for this week and the 2 previous weeks. And now we're caught up with those payments, and we'll start next week in order to continue with those weekly benefits. Tomorrow we anticipate doing a media briefing in the early afternoon. We'll let you know the exact time. There will not be another scheduled briefing today because I'll be leaving with the Lieutenant Governor, and I want to thank Billy for working throughout this storm and staying in the constant communication with me. But he and I will be leading a group of individuals from the state to go join up with some parish and local officials, and we will fly over those parishes that I mentioned earlier. We will let you know what time tomorrow to expect a press briefing. I'm assuming it will be about 1 o'clock because we intend to have our UCG meeting again at 10:30. But we'll let you know that for sure. So with that, Greg, I'll take your question.
Is there any issues that you're aware of with drinking water?
Yes, there are. So we know that there are a number of water systems that are down because of power loss and potentially other mechanical problems as well. And we know that some of them are not back online yet. Some of them came back online, but after a drop in pressure. And so there are boil advisories in place around the state. I don't have an extensive list here with me as to where those advisories are, but that's another reason why individuals need to pay close attention to their local elected officials and follow the directives that they've been given. We are very thankful when that water comes back up, even if it needs to be boiled for a while, because you don't have to boil it before you can fight a fire with it. And we're very concerned that fires may happen. Any time you're recovering from a disaster, I think you're at an elevated risk for all of these types of things. And so we're really asking all of the electric companies to prioritize restoring power to essential infrastructure. We've directed them specifically to water systems and to hospitals in order to try to make sure that we can get past this just as soon as possible. Sam?
Governor, do you have a timeline for when you spend all $600,000 homes that have power restored?
Yeah, we don't yet. And look, it's a Herculean task to get out and do the inspections necessary to figure out what the damage is. And then these electric companies and these contracted crews are going to have to set about working to restore power once they find out what the damage is. Now, we also are directing them to restore power to essential infrastructure first. Now, we will have better information coming from the Public Service Commission soon on this. And I know that we are accustomed to sort of instantaneously knowing things. We want to know things real time. But it was not until sometime after daylight today that we could actually start moving these crews into the affected area. And so they've been engaged in damage assessment today. And I know that they've started repair work as well. And we can be thankful that when they pre-position, many of them were doing maintenance work, cutting back vegetation away from the lines so that there would be fewer trees that would actually fall onto the wires and cause problems. But I don't have an answer for you yet. And I will tell you, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the number that I gave you is already old, because as that storm continued to move north, more and more homes and businesses were losing electricity. So it was about 600,000 when I left GOSEP to come over here. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if it's north of that now. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, you often talk about being a good neighbor. What kind of discussions are you having with other states as far as collaborating on resources?
First of all, I will tell you, I have been very gratified by the outreach that I've had from our neighbors. I've talked to Governor Abbott in Texas. I've talked to Governor Hutchinson in Arkansas and Governor Reeves in Mississippi, all of whom have offered their support. And, you know, it's just what we do for one another. And when the offer of support came from Texas, that was despite the fact that there was some impact from the storm in Texas. And when it came from Governor Hutchinson in Arkansas, he knew that when this storm exited Louisiana, it would be in Arkansas. So that's what we do. And I will tell you, it really is very helpful, because while we all have tremendous agencies and competent people, the capabilities are different, especially as it relates to the National Guard, because not every National Guard unit is the same. So, for example, we don't have a single Chinook helicopter, and if we need Chinooks, we can get them from Mississippi. So it's been gratifying, and I will tell you, at this point, we haven't had the need to ask them for assistance. But if we do have the need, we will call them directly, and we'll put out the EMAC request, which is the formal request that we make, so that they can be reimbursed by FEMA for the cost of the assistance that they do provide us. But it's a great question, and it is an example of being a good neighbor. And by the way, it's still important for Louisianans to be good neighbors to one another. And it's a little different in a COVID environment. It's doing all the things you would normally do, but doing it from 6 feet away while wearing a mask and washing your hands frequently. Yes, sir. Greg?
Governor, for the many people, especially with the break from the flood waters that want to get back and assess their own damage, are they clear to do that?
No. We have a lot of roads that continue to be closed, and not just because we want them closed, because they're unsafe. They have debris strewn across them. They have down power lines. We've got bridges that we haven't inspected, and so forth. And so we're going to ask people to be patient, and they're going to have a hard time getting back in. Let me tell you, we knew several hours ago about this fire in Westlake. And they had to work extremely hard trying to figure out how they were going to get close enough to that facility in order to fight the fire, because of all of the obstructions and live power lines that were down in that vicinity. And these are firefighters. These are professionals with much more equipment than individual residents are going to have. And so we do need to be patient, and as roads open, you can go to 511 LA. What is it, Sean?
511LA.org.
That's it. 511LA.org. And you can see real time what those closures are. But again, the more people on the road today, the harder it's going to be to get the first responders, the search and rescue, the power restoration crews, all of those assets and personnel to where they need to be. Yes, sir. Sam?
Yeah, on the chlorine gas fire, to confirm, this is chlorine gas that's burning into the air, is that right? And also, do you know how this happened, how long it might take to put out?
Yeah, I'm going to see if Butch or Colonel Reeves want to come and talk. We don't know everything there is to know about it. We have some assumptions, and quite often we don't air assumptions until the investigation is complete. But we know it's a serious situation, and I'm going to ask our folks from public safety to come up and give the best information that they have.
Hey, good afternoon. Yeah, BioLab is a manufacturer of pool chlorine products. At some time during the weather event last night, an undetermined amount of the product began to react and decompose, and the cause of this is still under investigation. As this type of chlorine begins to decompose, it generates heat, and it began to burn, releasing chlorine gas into the atmosphere. A small crew from BioLab made several unsuccessful attempts to extinguish the flames, and at that time, sometime around 10 o'clock or just before this morning, BioLab contacted state police to respond to the scene, and upon our arrival, we immediately issued a shelter-in-place order for the residents nearby in the town of Westlake. So BioLab is working with local and state officials, to include fire departments, the state fire marshal, DEQ, and state police, and some local fire departments from around the area, and to extinguish the fire and also to monitor the air quality.
Is there a timeline for when that's still going on?
It is still going on. No, I do not have a timeline for that.
Is the storm causing drought, or?
That's still under investigation. We believe that it began sometime during the course of the storm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the health risks associated with the fire and the
Well, like I said, the chlorine gas was released into the atmosphere, but we're working with DEQ and some of those to monitor those risks, and right now we're at a stable point with it.
The gas is no longer being released.
I'm going to let the chief speak to that because he probably has a better perspective on that part than I do.
Yeah, I mean, so specifically, I mean, the standard procedure when you have this, state police hazmat takes command of that, and there's a litany of things that need to be done. So immediately the Department of Environmental Quality responded. They started monitoring, and they're continuing to monitor. What they have found is no low-level detection of chlorine off-site, which meant where people walk and where people gather, which is a good thing. The cloud, the plume, as it goes in the air and moves out, there is chlorine in that, obviously. But those chemicals are falling in the lake, which is the right place for it because it dilutes the chlorine. So the off-site impact we don't believe is endangering anyone, but the standard procedure was the immediate shelter in place, and that was the action the state took.
Rather than leak, rather than send them on the way.
Exactly.
Sorry, you read about the chlorine is falling into the lake, and that's why it's not getting out into the air.
Well, it's a plume that's wind-driven. So as the plume goes up, it goes down. But the direction of the wind, the plume is causing the vapors to then suppress themselves in the lake, which then makes the chlorine not dangerous anymore. Water suppresses chlorine.
What symptoms do the individuals who may have been exposed to an unhealthy amount of chlorine be looking for, and has anybody reported those symptoms in that number?
Well, the symptoms of exposure to chlorine would be respiratory distress, respiratory problems. I don't have any knowledge if there's been any reported injuries.
Thank you.
Last question?
Thank you, Colonel Reeves and Fire Marshal Browning. Yes, sir.
Governor, you talked, when was the last time you talked to the president, and you heard from the Republican Party, you said to visit Louisiana this weekend, do you have knowledge of this from the president?
I have not heard anything about a visit. Obviously, we'll welcome the president anytime he wants to come. We're going to need substantial federal assistance going forward, and I think that that's always a good thing to have the decision maker on the ground to see for himself what the damage is, and so that we can express what the needs are as well. Again, especially in a COVID environment, and also because we still have a lot of hurricane season ahead of us, and there are still storms that are entering the Atlantic. I had an opportunity to speak with the president about 12:15 this morning, so shortly after midnight. He and I had a conversation. He let me know that he had directed all of the federal agencies to be leaning as far forward as possible and responding to our state and as needs developed. And I can also tell you that Administrator Gaynor, FEMA, and I have been in communication today about this. Tony Robinson in FEMA Region 6 has been closely monitoring the situation and in conversation with us. We expect him on the ground tomorrow. But yesterday I had an opportunity to speak with Chad Wolf, who is the Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, also Secretary Wilbur Ross of Commerce Department, and other federal officials. So we appreciate the attention that they've been showing Louisiana, the assistance that they're providing, and we want to assure them that we're going to be calling upon them in the future as well. Look, I want to thank you all for continuing to cover this. And again, we did not have the worst case scenario develop. We should all be thankful for that. And you know that I ask the people who are faithful to pray and to ask for blessings. And when we get them, we need to offer a prayer of thanksgiving too. So I'm asking the people of Louisiana to do that. But there are still thousands and thousands of families whose lives are not right side up today, either because their businesses have been destroyed, their homes have been damaged, they may be in a shelter, and we know that at least 4 families have lost a loved one. So let's lift them up in prayer. Let's understand we have a lot of work to do. This is very much a marathon. It is not a sprint. And I do want to remind people, it is quite often the case that it is the cleanup that causes people to seriously injure themselves or to do something that causes them to be killed in an accident. Whether it's a power line, a chainsaw, an automobile, whatever it is, we're asking people to be extremely careful out there. Don't do something you're not qualified to do, and we're asking people to be patient. Don't go out sightseeing. That's another way to be a good neighbor right now. So thank you all very much. We're going to head to Southwest Louisiana now, and we'll be back with you all tomorrow at about 1 o'clock, I believe. Thank you.
Patient work by the gardening team to get to its spectacular peak, a dazzling array of exotic and native shrubs and perennials. Just in time for the first guests.